All right, 8th graders, this is your practice test for preparing for the test that you'll take on Friday. This is week 2 of our math concept. So let's take a look at what it looks like. These are 2 practice problems. Pay close attention to the shaded area on your paper because it tells you what you're supposed to be doing. And this one is supposed to be dealing with absolute value. And not only do you have to work with it and show steps, but you also have to describe it and explain it. So let's look at how we might do that. So you might say, make sure that you show all your steps. So if we're doing number 1, the absolute value of negative 18 is 18 minus, and then the absolute value of 26 is 26. And now we have to do the math, but we never subtract in algebra. We add the opposite. Okay, and now they have opposite signs. One is a positive, the 18, and one is a negative, the 26, which means that we really have to do some subtracting. So over on the side of my paper, I'm going to subtract. I have to do a little borrowing. 16 minus 8 is 8, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So my answer ends up being an 8, but is it positive or negative? Well, because 26, there's more negatives than 18 positives, then our answer ends up being negative, and we box our answer. Okay. Number 2, you have to show how to solve for absolute value in 3 ways. So let's start with the definition. And the definition that you should be using is the distance from 0. And then you should also be saying that the distance from 0 and distance is always positive. And although I didn't model it this way, you should definitely be writing in complete sentences. On the test, I'm going to be expecting complete sentences. B, I'm going to slide it over here just so I can save space on my screen. But B, an example, might be something like the negative absolute value, or sorry, negative 4's absolute value is 4. Or you could have a positive 4 has an absolute value of 4. And remember, we talked in class about how you have to show both, that negative number and a positive number. So to earn full credit for showing an example, you need to show a positive and a negative. And then C would be to draw some sort of a diagram. So if I'm dealing with, say, the absolute value of negative 4, I might put it on a number line and show 0 and negative 4. Show that I'm at negative 4, but I want to know the distance from 0. So I would have to count my hops. How many steps or units is it away from 0? And so to get to 0, it is 4 units away. And so that's how you get the absolute value of negative 4. All right, let's look at the next kind of problem. Our next problem is multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. So I'm going to remind us that when you let's try that again. When you multiply a positive times a positive, you get a positive. When you multiply a negative times a negative, you get a negative. When you multiply a positive times a negative, you get a negative. And likewise, if you are dividing, then you would say a positive divided by a positive is going to give you a positive. A negative divided by a negative is going to give you a negative. And a positive divided by a negative is going to give us a negative. So it doesn't matter if you are multiplying or dividing, they have the same rules. So let's take a look at our problem. Number 3 has a negative times a positive, which means that I'm automatically going to end up with a negative number. Remember, we can do our traditional 14 times 6 math, or I could do it using my, using that method that I taught you, the area model. So I'm actually going to model it with the area model, and I'm going to say that we have 6 times 10, which is 60, and I'm adding it to 6 times 4, which is 24, and my answer is 84, but because it was a negative times a positive, I have to throw in that negative. Okay, and you can do it traditional math. You would show the steps off to the side, so 6 times 4 is 24, carry my 2, 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2 is 84. And again, it would still end up being negative because it's a negative times a positive. Now let's do our division. So we're probably going to need some long division, so I'm going to set it up. 156 divided by 12, and it is a positive divided by a negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. I just have to do the math. So 12 goes into 15 one time. When I subtract, I get a 3, and 12 goes into 36 3 times. So my answer ends up being negative 13. Now, you don't actually get credit for this problem unless you show these kind of work steps of some sort. One of these work steps has to be shown for each of the problems. We are adding and subtracting integers, okay? And the rules say that if your signs are different, then you subtract. If your signs are the same, then you add. So our first problem, number 5, has a negative and a positive, which means that they're different and we have to subtract. So 31 minus 19, I need to borrow. So 11 minus 9 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So my answer is 12. However, I have to decide if it's a positive or a negative. So because 31 is actually a larger number, my answer is going to stay positive because there's more positives than negatives when we subtracted. Now number 6, I'm expecting you to write out and show negative 15 plus a negative 34. And then the signs are both the same, which means that you're going to add. So I'm going to take my 15 and my 34 off to the side. I'm going to do my adding, and I get 49. But if I have some negatives and I add more negatives to it, I end up with negative 49. Last problem is order of operations, or what we know as GM8. Okay, so you have to make sure that you're using your correct order of operations. So I'm going to start by using my grouping symbols, and I have a 9 minus a 4, which is 5, plus 2 to the third divided by 4. Done with my grouping symbols. Now I need to do my exponents. So I'm going to leave my 5 alone, leave my plus sign alone. 2 to the third power is really 2 times 2 times 2, which is 4 times 2, which is 8. So 2 to the third power is 8, and I still have a divided by 4. I'm done with my exponents. Now I need to do multiplication and division left to right, whichever one comes first. So I have a 5 plus, well, I can't use him yet, so I'm going to keep him. And then I have an 8 divided by 4, so that's division, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. I can solve it. I'm now done with all my multiplication and division, and now I need to do my adding and subtracting. 5 plus 2 is 7. So the answer to this problem is 7. All right, that's it for today. Come back with questions for class tomorrow.